So I think we're ready to get started. My name is Aaron Minear. I'm the Director of Web Development at Isovera. We're a small firm based in Waltham, Massachusetts. Work with a variety of different kinds of clients. We're a Drupal shop. That's pretty much all we do. And we work with e-commerce, nonprofits, higher education, libraries, a variety of different kinds of clients. So I'm going to talk about using actually the Drupal 8 CSS architecture with Drupal 7. This SMACSS, your theme up, is kind of just to grab some attention. But the concepts from SMACSS really kind of dominate the Drupal 8 CSS architecture. I'll get into that. Well, actually, how many people know anything about SMACSS or have like just a little? Okay. What about Drupal? I'll make sure to spell it out. Drupal? Okay, cool. I'll keep asking questions as we go on. So this is an actual style rule from one of our projects from a year ago, and it's I would say it falls into this category of spaghetti CSS, where you have these really kind of long strings of selectors, and I didn't actually write this, but so I don't know why the body tag is there, the element, but you can see that it really kind of is very specific, and when you code in this fashion, you end up getting like just long streams of this kind of stuff in your style sheets. And it's hard to take this kind of code and like copy and paste it and like adjust it and then figure out like what are the overrides. You end up like kind of having to do a lot of hacking around with Firebug or Chrome developer tools, like what's going on, how do I override this, and maybe getting it like important just to like override it. It's kind of a mess. It's fine if it's a small project and it's one-off and you don't ever have to come back to it. But if you want to actually reuse that code and scale it up, you're going to be in for trouble.
You actually had a project that you never had to go back to?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not actually high. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So, how many people have worked with Sass or Less or other CSS preprocessors? Okay, a lot of people. Sass is awesome, great tool, love it, recommend it. But it kind of makes this problem worse because it's really like the first thing you learn with Sass is that I can nest my selectors and like create these nice groupings, and it's just easier to code and read. But when this actually gets rendered, you still end up with those long selectors and the same problem, and it kind of encourages that. So back to that same problem. So that's what this architecture is meant to address, and I'm going to actually pop it open if I can. So this is the Drupal.org website, the coding standards. So this is the section we're in. So there's the CSS coding standards, which everybody should check out. It's very important and use all the time. And there's this formatting guidelines, which is, so this is all kind of Drupal 80 now. But really, this is the formatting guidelines. It's pretty much the same for Drupal 7 and Drupal 8, and it's the CSS architecture and file organization. I won't talk too much about that, but that is new for Drupal 8 core, right? And contrib. This is the model for writing your CSS. If you're a core developer right now. So I'll have these slides available off my profile so you can link to them. So that's, I mean, a lot of what I'm going to say, you can just go read that and follow the standards there. So I already kind of got into this. Why do we want to do this? We want to make those style rules easier to use, more clear, more predictable, like what they're actually going to do when you use them, easier to read, reusable, so you can take the style rule from one project and use it on a new project, or replicate it throughout that project, and maintainable, to talk about coming back to a project later on, or handing it over to somebody else, and scalable, to have a bigger team of developers working on it, or a bigger project with tons and tons of CSS. So the origins of this architecture are there's more to it than this, but there's really three kind of methodologies that this comes from. So there's SMACSS, obviously. That's scalable and modular CSS. This BEM syntax, the block element and modifier, and object-oriented CSS, which is this framework and concept. And I'll go into each one of these. So SMACSS was started by this guy, Jonathan Snook. He actually published the book, SMACSS, and it's how I really started down this path. About a little over a year ago, I heard about SMACSS and was like dealing with these issues. So I went to smacks.com and bought the book and was reading it through, and it's not, the book has nothing to do with Drupal. I should say that Jonathan Snook was a Yahoo developer, so think like Yahoo Mail and portals and whatever else they do now, and also Shopify. So he's working on these web apps and having to deal with these really high-scale style rules. And so this is the SMACSS system, the basic structure. You have base style sheets, layout style sheets, what he calls modules, and we're going to call components, and state rules and theme rules, which we're going to call skin. So John Alban at the Austin DrupalCon, this is a quote from him. You can go watch the session, and I highly recommend it, actually. Like he said, it's like Jonathan Snook looked at all the Drupal terms and said, how can I mess with them the most? So in particular, module and theme are not what we talk about. It's not what we mean as Drupal people. But the base rules is like very common in Drupal themes now. You have a base set of styles for your standard elements. In this case, body, form elements, and your colors for your links. Just the really generic basic stuff, and also CSS resets to make sure that your style rules are consistent. Like to have a kind of a consistent blank canvas to work from across different browsers, so that you're not having to reconcile stuff that, just like setting those margins and padding across browsers. So then another category was layout rules, and this encompasses things like Drupal's block regions, a grid system, and there's other kinds of layout style rules that you can get into. And for this particular topic, I strongly recommend checking out this layout design patterns. Another DrupalCon session from Austin. Also, he presented at Design for Drupal just recently. Okay, so I'm going to kind of take a little aside here. How many people have heard of Ed Emberley? No, nobody? Really? This is like my childhood inspiration. He does like children's drawing books, and so this is one of his books, Make a World. So his whole philosophy is to just like have like drawings that are really easy for kids to draw, and he across the top you can see that there's this fish being drawn, and at the bottom you have like these individual, I'm going to say sub-objects, right? And so these are like your sub-objects, and then you have your fish, right? And you just draw it up from these little pieces, and then you can take that fish and draw it in different variations, and this is how I spent my childhood. So, a design component, again from SMACSS, they would say modules. There are repeatable design chunks, nav bars, blocks, dialogues, buttons, carousels are examples of components. And I'm going to talk mostly about components because that's like what, as a Drupal themer, you end up having to do the most of. So they can be simple, or they can be like a button, or they can be pretty complicated and made of smaller components. And I think one of the messages I want to communicate on this session is just, this is like a whole thought process when you're like analyzing this design system. Like, what is the component here? And sometimes you don't know, is this a subcomponent? I think when it gets really fuzzy, I think it's safe to err on the side of making it a separate component instead of trying to create some kind of hierarchy. So this is what component classes start to look like. Does this look familiar to people? It's kind of, so this, again, this is straight out of SMACSS. So yeah, pod, I guess that's WordPress, right? But the key thing here is that you're using classes instead of elements selectors, like H1, H2. And you don't want to use IDs, and because you're making these reusable, and an ID should only appear once on a page. So classes you can have multiple instances, and you want to get rid of that hierarchy. Just one class, so you can take that and put that in different places. There's no context assumed for the component. So that's components, and I just want to mention the state category for the style rules. They're classes also, and they're usually working with JavaScript, and they would be prefixed with is dash, so is open, is active, and this is a really good habit to get into with writing your JavaScript and setting a class, and then using that class to control the display. Okay, so that's SMACSS. Now I'm going to talk about BEM really quickly. It's the block element modifier syntax. So these are the kind of the origins of the Drupal 8 CSS standards. This was developed by a Russian company named Yandex. I guess it's like the Russian European. I think they're in Europe, but they're like the Google search engine of Russia. And so this syntax has, instead of component, they call them blocks. And then they have the double underscores and then element, or dash dash and a modifier. Dash dash because, like you saw the earlier classes, you would use a hyphen in between, like instead of a space in a class name, right? So that kind of creates this conceptual model of like the fish with the sub elements in this case. And the other school I just want to mention is object-oriented CSS. Came from Nicole Sullivan. Again, these slides, that's actually a link you could go read about OOCSS, which is pretty interesting. She's got a framework. You can download it from GitHub and play around with it. I won't talk much more about OOCSS, but like it kind of carries the same philosophy that we're using. So this is the Drupal 8 CSS architecture, the component rules, and this really kind of synthesizes those together. So you get the component name, which would be the block in BEM. This is like pretty much the BEM syntax, but with like different names, right? Component name and then dash dash variant for. So the variant would be like a different color tail on the fish, or a different color fish. It's just like a slight change of that component. And then sub-objects that are like pieces that make up that component. And then you can have variants on the sub-objects within it. So I want to make sure I say that, I remember saying it, but like you don't want to actually try to model the hierarchy of the component, of like the HTML hierarchy with these components. You want to keep it this two-tier kind of level, or one tier. So I think I say that later, but just to make sure I say that. So one cool thing if you're using SASS, since 3.3 and up, you can actually use the parent selector to do that hierarchy. I mean, it's not a selector space selector. It's actually that single class. So that's pretty cool to like get it nice and encapsulated. So go crazy with that. Okay, so that's the syntax. Let's talk about trying to use that with Drupal 7. The thing is, to use those classes, you have to change your markup, your HTML. And with Drupal 7, that you're going to need to know more than the CSS. You're going to have to change that markup that you're getting from it. So that's going to require some site building skills, and it may require to get into the PHP code for certain things, and like modifying theme functions, you know, templates, and maybe even creating some custom module code, depending. So not always. And the other thing is that you don't have to like go like full on board. We're doing SMACSS, Drupal 8 CSS, and that's that for this project, because you'll never do it with Drupal 7. So hybrid's perfectly fine. They can coexist together. It doesn't matter. So to get the HTML, what you need, you can get a lot of contrib modules. I'll list some, and your choice of a starter or base theme can get you a lot further along. And like I said, you'll get into theme functions and templates, and maybe with the custom module code preprocess hooks in particular. So this is a list, not comprehensive at all, but primary modules that I've used for this kind of getting these classes into your markup, right? Customizing those classes. And I'll show some examples of most of these. So panels, views is really great for getting this stuff in, but there's one hitch there. Display suite, super great for getting classes on your fields and all over the place. Menu attributes for menu items. Block class for blocks, obviously. Node class, I don't have an example of this. I want to say one thing about the node class is this is for individual nodes, and this is what content editors would add the class. So I actually try to avoid this most of the time, because they don't necessarily know what the class is in the style rules. You have a style guide, they have more sophisticated content editors. Maybe that does make sense, but so just know what the purpose of that module is. Semantic fields, it's a nice module, kind of a simpler version of the display suite maybe for doing this. And field formatter class is another option. And then there's like modules like I don't even know about. Okay.
What about fences?
Does fences give you classes? Yeah, but
if you don't start with fences, it can break things that you've done. So
right.
You can choose your markup element for each field. Pretty labor intensive. If you're starting fresh, like great place to start, but not always the best.
I went and looked at fences. I've used fences a while ago, and I tried to use it just to check, and I didn't see a place to put in a class. It was for the HTML5 elements, right? So.
No, it just.
Oh yeah, it's not classes.
It just defines the wrapper for your field instead of the nested wrappers that you get.
Right.
In core, you can simplify it or use a different element.
Yeah, so cool idea for HTML5, but it doesn't really address the issue of having the classes. So panels, like this is actually really simple. So if you're working with panels, it's super easy to do this. You just go on your little panel pane widget, and then I used to just completely ignore this, but just CSS properties, and then you can just put in a class on your panel pane. So this is an example of a highlighted class. So this is a real example, and what that does is it just put this gray box on this block that's really kind of simple style. But then on this site, you can go on any panel pane and just say like, oh, this should be highlighted, and just put that class, and there it is. Yeah, really, really simple example. All my examples are blocks. Sorry, I should have spread that out a little bit more. But with views, I think if you worked with Drupal, you've probably all seen this. When you're creating a field view, field-based view, you have the option to customize the field HTML. So this is Views 3, I believe. It's not in Views 2, right? But everybody should be using Views 3. So yeah, you just choose to create a class, and you can put a class on the field right there. I think it'll let you do that for the labels and the wrapper too. I don't know, not the default classes. That's up to you. And you can put classes on the views row. So that was the field, and then like the row of the fields. And in this case, it's an unformatted list. If you click settings, you'll see something like this. But watch out, there's this bug/feature about if you put a class on that row, it will convert underscores to dashes, which totally screws up that syntax, because with a row kind of means like it should be a component in a lot of cases, but you can't generate the, sorry, the view itself could be like a listing, and that would be the component. And then you have each row under that be like a sub-object, but you can't do that. And that's an open issue. So just you have to do the rows as components, individual. So like in this one, it's just the row is a component. Is that clear? Yeah. It's an open issue. Let's see if it gets fixed. So the menu attributes module, it basically just allows you to put classes on menus, menu items. Sorry, and it. I used to kind of avoid this module because it gives you like all these different attributes like title ID. I think I can scroll. Name, rel, style, target, access key. And sometimes you want those, but like if you just set this hook and say unset those attributes, I just want the class, and it works exactly the way I want. But it's it's a cool module, extendable. Okay. So the semantic fields module allows you to get kind of granular classes on different aspects of your fields, and it works with these presets. I guess that's kind of a older Drupalism, where you can define a preset. It was more made for HTML5, kind of an alternative to fences, but you had to like define what these presets were, and then you could apply them to different fields. But it gives you like a lot of options to put classes on your fields, and like when you have multiple items in a field, like how those classes are handled and the labels. It's pretty robust. Okay, so those are some contrib modules. I'll talk about display suite in a little bit later. So here's some themes that I've looked into to more and less extent. I primarily work with the Zen theme, and I think it has the most support for this approach. Probably because John Alpin, who's the CSS, the Drupal 8 CSS architect, is also a maintainer of the Zen theme. And I've heard the Zurb Foundation is pretty good to get started with SMACSS. Omega's looking like it has the base layout stuff, and then you can kind of do what you want. And I also want to mention the Bastard theme, which is on GitHub. I don't think this is on Drupal.org, but the interesting thing about the Bastard theme is that it allows you to kind of unset a lot of these Drupal core style sheets that you end up having to override and don't conform to the standard. And it has some other things. Like it really basically says, forget Drupal core, we're going on our own. And maybe you want to do that. So on the topic of the Zen theme, it's still in active development, which is great. And if you check out the 6 dev branch, you'll see like the most clearest implementation I've ever seen of this. And you can, if you go and look in the components directory, you'll see that there's individual SASS files for each type of component. And this is the Drupal 8 CSS architecture specification. And then as a developer, you can just go into this directory and immediately, you don't have to keep scrolling through this or search to find like where the components are. They're just defined right there. And here's the issue, right, for getting that together in the Zen theme. Okay, so yeah, I mean, choosing the right theme can get you further along than other themes. I'm sure there's other things out there too, by the way, that will help you along and have more or less support. Just I don't have experience with them. So, so I'm going to talk about some block templates that I built, and give a shout out to Kate, who worked with on this, co-developed. So this is the Tufts library, Tufts Tisch library site, and we had this block where it announced like what the open hours are, today's hours, and it had this design that's nice, and it's got this icon in the upper right hand corner, this black-white kind of finicky, like where the hours is bold, and like we got the dog ear in the bottom right hand corner, and it's a responsive site, so we got to handle all that. And all right, so that's cool. And then there's another one, another block, and it's slightly different. And it's actually a menu block. So this one's provided by a module. This one's provided by, well, also a module, but the menu block module. It has a different icon, but it has like the same look and feel otherwise. So those blocks all appear in the left sidebar here, and you can see there's a couple others. And all right, so I could assume the context, and like this is just the left sidebar, and that's what the blocks in the left sidebar look like. But oh wait, you go to an internal page, and it's on the right sidebar. Oh, and there's another menu block in the left sidebar that looks nothing like that. So this is a good case for this componentized approach. And so setting these styles on blocks. So it takes a little bit more work than just putting a single class on the block. This is what the default Drupal 7 block template file looks like, the HTML anyway. I might have simplified this just for this presentation. But you can see that there's the classes. Let me see my cursor. Yeah. There's the classes that get printed on that container wrapper div. That's it. So we needed something a bit more, well, you'll see in a second. But so to like say, okay, that template's not quite what I need. I need to define another template for these specific cases. Use this theme hook suggestions variable okay, so I can't get into like the actual conditioning here, but to like in some condition use this block template instead, and I'll also throw this class on. So you could use the block class to do that, but in this case it's like I'm doing it all here anyway. I'll just put that ancillary block class on it as well. So it's going to use this different block template, and it's going to put this ancillary block class on it. So similar template. I got that same classes array, so whatever classes get put on blocks, it's also putting here. But then I have these other classes to work with the sub-object model. This wrapper class, and then this footer class with a couple other, and this is totally just like design stuff, which probably shouldn't be in markup, but I couldn't figure out how to do it without the markup, so that's why it's there. And notice that even though footer corner and footer spacer are under footer, they're still the same level. You want to not create like sub hierarchies. Then you could potentially move things. In this case, you wouldn't move it around, but in other cases, you would be able to move that around, and it doesn't care what the hierarchy is. So that block gets rendered into this template. Again, a little bit simplified, but so this is the actual markup that you would see on the site. So you can see the ancillary block class. wrapper. The default, this is the Zen default block __ title, so getting a little SMACSS there, and then block dash title, the older class. It's okay, they can coexist. They're not going to hurt each other. And then class specifically for kind of like a tiny little component there, just for the time. And then these just empty presentational divs. So in the SASS file, or I mean, this is in the CSS file as well, I mean, except for the SASS includes here, you end up with this flat level. So just ancillary block, put some classes on there. I think that was like positioning, padding, or something. The wrapper, the background colors, and the spacer has just, go back to it. I still think there's a little bit of shadow down below. We just needed to make sure that was there. And then this dog ear corner, right? That's a sprite that gets displayed there. Okay, so it's also a response site. There's a different version of this block that appears when you're in the mobile breakpoint. So it's green. Like obviously, we want to put a variant here. But otherwise, reuse that same code. And in that case, all we have to do is add this accent variant class. Okay, so that, yeah, so that's just like the block templates and a little bit of theme work there. So I'm going to show some work we did recently with Display Suite, which has some, like maybe for a lot of sites a bit overkill for what you might need, but in some cases it's really nice. So this is a site we launched recently called BidSquare, and it's an auctioning site. And so this is a node, an auction type node, and this is the teaser view mode, or I think it's maybe a large teaser, but teaser view mode. And it's got these objects that make it up, or elements, whatever you want to say. This badge in the upper left-hand corner, the image. It's got the title of the auction, the auction house that's conducting the auction, the date, and then this view catalog link below it with a little icon. So the way that we did this was with displays. So not even like the Display Suite module, but there's also an extras module, and if you enable that, you can go into this configuration and choose to enable field templates. And it's kind of a lot like the semantic fields module. It gives you these options and text fields to put classes on, like really well. So there's different templates that you can actually choose, different levels of detail. This is the default one. And it also is good for HTML5, so you can choose, like, in this case, so this is actually the title element, which without Display Suite is a real pain in the neck to work with. Because in Drupal 7, it's not a field, it's like this privileged thing. That's different in Drupal 8, but not in Drupal 7. But if you use Display Suite, you can treat it like another field, put your own classes on it. In this case, we preserved the Zen classes as well. So this is the default one, and then you can also use this expert template. There's a couple others, but the expert one, you can really see that it opens up a lot of options to how you put classes on your your fields and the different like elements within the field, right? Labels, the wrapper, and also, again, what HTML elements you're using. So you can also do this with groups, the field group module, which is really cool, and then you can kind of group your fields together and use those components. So in this case, we use this auction is the component and underscore underscore info as the sub-object of that component. So here's a simplified version of what that markup actually looks like. And so we can see at the outermost div that there's the auction class, and then within it the sub-objects of that component. So auction underscore underscore badge, and then also this variant that this is the live type of badge. There's other types of auction badges too. And then this container sub-object of the info, which is that text down below. Oh, sorry. And the image of the auction itself, the auction, and that's actually a separate component. We didn't. I don't remember why we didn't sub-object that, but. And then auction underscore underscore title for the title of the auction. There's the gallery name, just a link. It's fine on its own for this. And the date and that view catalog link. And we had to customize it depending on what the view mode was. And there's that icon. It's an SVG icon. Okay. Oh, and then the text, the link. So this is what the SASS file looks like for that. So I don't think there was much. Yeah, I think that was it for the auction component itself. Just some styling, a position, just to make sure that it was not. I don't remember exactly what, but the within that that component class we have the badge with had rounded just the one rounded corner to match the image. So that was a mix-in, custom mix-in. And then the title, which has some font size. There are other properties in here, but I just had to get it to fit on the slide. And there's the view catalog icon with a color using SASS again, and some padding on the info. So I should probably. So that's what it looks like. So this is the info right here, auction info. This is the badge and the auction image. And again, it's just flat. Like there's no selector, space selector. So actually, I don't have slides for this, but I just want to show. So here's those. Not a responsive site, so it's a little big. But you can see that these are the auction teasers here on the home page. But then if you go to other pages, like these are some past ones, it gets replicated on different parts of the site. And if you would go to like, so here we can see that same design, but it's actually, well, not in this case because there's only 3, but it would be here. In a like a slider. So we can just keep reusing those style rules and that markup. So just to recap, the Drupal 8 CSS architecture, it synthesizes these best practices that came from other web projects besides Drupal. It's great for larger scale projects. So it makes it more efficient, easier to reuse, maintain, and make bigger. So you need to think in terms of a design system with repeatable patterns. Whether you like get that comp from, when you get a comp from the designer, sit down and think, what are the components here? And it takes, with Drupal 7, some extra work to get those classes where you need them. But that can coexist with your other code that's ugly, it's okay. You just know what your components are. So I just wanted to mention that like this system is still like new. It's still evolving. We're using it now, but like there's other stuff happening right now, and I don't know how long we keep using the system. I just discovered attribute modules. As I think it's just out this month, that use, instead of using classes, they use custom attributes, and you can actually use these attributes with a special selector with CSS, and it works pretty well in different kinds of browsers. So that, and it handles the namespacing problem, like where your different classes may have, like you got to be sure that your component class isn't already used somewhere else. It handles that problem. And then web components, if you've followed anything about them, may kind of handle that whole namespacing problem by rendering all this stuff as just a single custom element. So that's a space you want to definitely keep an eye on in the future. But there's so little browser support right now that it doesn't matter right now, except for if you're using like Chrome Canary maybe. So that's it. So anybody got questions? Go ahead.
So, you know, using good SMACSS markup and everything, you've got good reusable chunk of code. But in the case of, say, the display suite fields, how are you handling deployment, configuration management, or reusing it? You just have to go in manually and like reclass every field on the project, say reusing those.
Well, display suite is fully exportable. You can featureize all that configuration from display suite. And, yeah, all the modules I mentioned, they're exportable. So those classes are all contained in your features code. So it deploys fine. Any other questions?
So how do you deal with nested lists? If you only allow yourself 2 levels of selectors, how can you say that a 3rd level nested list should be different from a 4th level?
So I think that's covered in the Drupal 8 CSS page. I'm not sure. With the SMACSS philosophy, the idea is that you would put if you really want to be strict about that, you put the classes on the list items themselves. But if that didn't make sense, it's okay to do the hierarchy. Where the hierarchy is not going to change, especially with menu items. I kind of wish I threw in a slide for this, but where in the Zen theme, you'll see like .menu item and .menu link as classes, and those are consistently hierarchical. And then if you go look at the SMACSS documentation, they say in that case where you know that hierarchy is consistent, actually put that in your code and use the parent selector, the greater than. So you'd say .menu item greater than .menu link. That's fine. That's part of your component, and it makes sense. So you know, be practical about it. Like if it makes sense for you, put the hierarchy there.
How do you keep track of all like the component class names so that some people aren't reusing, or that they will reuse rather than remake? So
I think that's where like getting a style guide set up, and you know, if you check out John Albin's presentation at the Austin DrupalCon, he used, I don't remember the name of it, but it was this Sass generated style guide for MSNBC. So I really want to start using that, and then like basically just renders your components in this this page, and people can refer to them. You may want to do also like before you start implementing them, just kind of get the comps and kind of go through and figure out what they should be, and create your own inventory, just like a spreadsheet or a text file, what those components should be for the site.
I came in a little bit late, so I didn't hear all about the advantages of this approach. So like I feel like I did for Drupal 8 and things like that. Mm-hmm. But it seems much more complex and requiring like much of stuff. It seems like my first impulse looking at it is, wow, this is really going to slow me down. Because, and so I guess my question is, do you think this is a workflow that I, as someone primarily would love, let's say, on smaller sites, do you think it's appropriate for someone like me? It's like this is just the way, like this conceptually makes so much sense. You should just accept the pain of learning it. Or do you think that this is more suited to like complex level sites, and that a kind of more conventional approach to CSS and SMACSS and stuff would still be appropriate for smaller sites? I'd just be curious.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta find. It depends on the site, and like if you said if it's just you and it's a small project and it's a one-off project, it's probably not worth that. And it depends on the budget, right? And it always depends on the budget, right? So I think, and you can be, like I said, you can just be judicious about, this is like the one component. Like we, on that BidSquare site, we didn't do what you can't do for everything with Drupal 7. It's too much work. But you can say, like, this is an auction. This makes sense as a component. And then, try to, like, break that out separately. So, and, it's also going to depend. I mean, we get a lot of projects that we didn't build originally, and we're not going to go back and reverse engineer. Right. So, the whole point of this session is just like do what's appropriate for the particular project, and if it's a new project and there's going to be a lot of other developers working on it, then this system is really going to help you a lot. Or even just if you're going to have to go back and tweak those style rules. I mean, like I can't count the times though a client has said, "Oh, we just want to do this one thing, and that's that," and then like 2 months later, it's like, "Oh, we wanted to redo that, but like this way." Okay, that could have been a component. Right.
Do you find that you can reuse components between projects, or is it mostly within one project, similar elements appearing on different pages?
So right now we're using them for specific, like that auction site, it's so client specific in that particular case that I wouldn't try to reuse that. But maybe the conceptual model. The thing that's happening though is that contrib modules and Drupal 8 Drupal 8 will make that reusable for all Drupal projects. So I'd say in the near term, no, but it's kind of like the features module, how that was supposed to be like you create a feature and then you can just drop it into another project and use it on another project and never. No, we're just gonna use that for deployment. I think it depends on how you write your components. I think like some things like buttons, which kind of like I think of like bootstrap buttons. Like you could just take that class and just easily take it from one project and drop it into another. Yeah, okay, I've done that with buttons. So more simple components. Anybody else?
I was just going to say that it's KSS node.
Yeah,
the style sheet generator that John mentioned.
Yeah, I'll put.
Hologram is also one that I'm just seeing pop up. It's interesting.
What's
very
that?
Similar. Hologram is also very similar to KSS, but that's just slightly different notation style. It's a little bit simpler name. Cool.
Yeah, I think KSS. There's the Node version, which John Alvin recommended. There's also a Ruby version. So I think the Node was like a recreation of it. All right. Anybody else? All right. Thanks everybody.